And welcome to the castle, everybody. This is Nightsaber Z42 back with another tutorial on Star Wars FFG and Roll20 in general. So today we're going to talk about obligation and duty and how to set up a table so you could roll triggers for those respective mechanics. So the first thing that you're going to do as a GM, you'll collect all of your players' obligations. They would probably have them set in a specific. They'll probably have them set in their character sheet. If they do, it'll be a little bit easier for you. But if not, you probably discuss it with them beforehand, and that way you can grab all of that. You'd have all of that written down. So it's located in their character sheet all the way down at the bottom under game mechanics and obligation. They probably have something like this: depth, magnitude, probably 5 if you're in a 5 group, a 5-party group. And then they'll list out their details. I owe the Pikes a ton of money. Okay. So they would have something like that. And they would have one for each of their obligations. And so what you would do, or at least what I have done, I would go ahead and make a spreadsheet. That way I can have everything right there. Or actually what I have done, I wrote it on a little note card. That way I can have everything right out in front of me. So what we'll do, we'll take a look at all of their, all of our triggers that we can have. So for this example, I have something along, I have something like this. Okay. So like this would be the name of the player. Actually, I'll go ahead and add a row. So PC, gotta label it. I'd have the value that it's worth, the actual type, and those are the 3 things that you're gonna need the most. You don't need to go ahead and create the table, because we're gonna have the Roll20 actually make the table for us in a certain way. So, for example, Grim has a lot of obligations. So we might want to check it with him on those. But they're each worth 5. He's taken quite a bit. Dario here's got 10. Nyx has 10. Nio has 5. And actually, Nio's got another one that's 5, if I remember correctly, and Eaton has one that is 5. Okay, so now you're gonna label their actual type. So duty bound is 1, responsibility, favor, spelled differently, depth, and Dario's got depth. Nyx has depth, betrayal, and depth, I believe, was Nio's. I actually didn't write it down. Eaton has depth. Okay, so there's a lot of depth going around in this party for one of my games that I have. So now that I have the value and the type, I have it written down on my note card. I'm going to make the table. So let's go over here to our little test game. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the 5th bar over to the right is the collection. It's where your macros are stored, any decks that you have, or like any custom made like playing card decks that you have, or your rollable tables. We're going to be using the rollable tables. So let's go ahead and add. So we have a new rollable table. We'll click on that and we get to name it. Don't include spaces in the name. If you try, it's going to automatically give you a dash. So this is going to be obligation trigger. Okay. Players can roll from the table. We're going to click that off because as a GM, we're going to have access to that. And I'm actually going to teach you a way where you can hide your roll so your players won't see what's coming. So let's add a new item. So I am very organized, and so I always start with the name and the actual type of the debt. And this is very important. The weight, which is optional, if you include this, it needs to basically, everything here has to add up to 100. So this is a way of creating a D100 system, because in the actual core rulebook, what you would do, you would roll a D100. If it is higher than your PCs, like when you make the table, if it's higher than the PCs, then it will actually, nothing will happen, nothing will trigger. But if it's actually within the obligation of all the PCs collected, then it has a chance to, it's gonna trigger somebody's obligation. And then the actual roll, the number of the roll, will dictate whose obligation gets triggered and which obligation. So what we'll do, we're actually gonna put the weight as the value of the of his actual obligation. We don't need to drop a file, but we'll go ahead and save the changes. And we're gonna do this for every single obligation that my PCs have. So this one is responsibility. This one's also going to be 5. And you'll see that it keeps adding and adding. The thing is, as your party or anybody in the party, whether it's the party collective or an individual, as obligation or has a change in their obligation value, you'll have to change this in a certain way. And it's actually fairly easy. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to finish this up. Darius got a debt of 10 because he likes to do a lot of stuff. And we're gonna add Nyx, who's also got a value of 10. And I totally forgot to add, she's got a debt. Yes, definitely label the character and the actual type of obligation that they have, because if you don't, you're going to be scrambling to figure out what has been triggered specifically. It won't actually tell you. So I believe you also had a debt, but not to the Pikes, surprisingly. And Eaton has one that is 5, and I almost forgot he's got a debt. Okay, so there we go. If you have like somebody who's got 2 of the same, then I would go ahead and specify. So let's say Grim had another debt to like the Hutts, then I would go ahead and specify this debt is for the Pikes, and then maybe he's got the other one is for the Hutts. And the last thing that we need to add is a nothing happens. So what we have, you're gonna add up the total of all of the obligation values. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 45, 50, and 55. So my PCs have a total debt of 55, okay? We need to subtract that from 100, and so that'll be 45. So if we roll above a 45, or 45 and above, or sorry, if we roll above a 55, then nothing is going to happen. And that trigger is going to have a weight of 45 for the difference. And so we'll save the table. Now whenever we roll, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Nyx's debt has been called. So now we can see for this session where Nyx's obligation is going to trigger. Now in the actual collection, we can never mind. Yeah, we can add a macro to this rollable table right here. So I'm going to show you an example of what I've done, and it's actually going to look very similar to this table right here. So let's go to the Jewel of Yavin game, and I'll show you specifically what I've done. Let's go to the collections, and you can see that I have my obligation trigger. Something that I probably should have done, though, is not add anything. because I need to delete this because I don't have that player in this campaign anymore. And the nothing happens is going to be 45, right? 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 55. So yeah, that should go ahead. And as you see, players cannot roll from this table. It's called obligation trigger. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a macro. And so when you add a macro, you're going to name it. Don't include the hashtag in the or spaces in the name. And then you're actually going to type out the macro code and you can test it. So what I've done, can I get rid of this macro, please? No, I can't. Okay. So what I've done for this obligation GM trigger, I did my, I started it with the / GM roll. This actually hides the roll from your players, so only the GM can see this trigger. And then one tape or one T, and then in your brackets have the name of your rollable table. And so it's pulling the roll from the obligation trigger, and it will actually hide the roll from players. So if I test that, oh gosh, gotta scroll all the way down. It says, to the GM, rolling, one obligation trigger, Dram's duty bound has been triggered. The players cannot see this, only the GM. And so now what we do is, under collection, I put in the bar. So now, I don't have to go to this page anymore. I can just go to this button, obligation trigger, and press that button, and now I've got all, I can trigger I can trigger the obligation at the beginning of the session or the end of the session, so I can prepare for the next one whenever I want. So there you go, a quick little tutorial on obligation tables and duty tables, because I believe duty in Age of Rebellion is the same thing as obligation. For morality and Force and Destiny, you're only rolling a D100, and yeah, so I don't think there's really a way that you could make the rollable table work that way. So anyways, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to leave a comment down below for any ideas or topics that you would like for me to cover in future videos. And please give this video a huge thumbs up to support the series, and share this video and any knowledge within with anybody that could really use it. And I will see you guys in the next video.